Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from November 27th, 2020, and I'm recording this on May 28th, 2021. As always, I give the dates so you know when this information is actually most relevant because this comic market is really moving lately, especially in 2021. So, as always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Key Collector Comic Tom Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. So we're trying to look back at these books that were moving in the market 6 months ago, that people were jumping on, that people were chasing, and see how they're doing now 6 months later. See if they were good investments, see if they were worth chasing then, or if you'd been better off just being patient. So we can all make a little bit better decisions about the comic books that we go after and when we go after them. So we got only 17 books this week, which is, considering the last few weeks, I feel like we've had like 18, 19, 20 fairly consistently. So a little less to talk about this week, but let's get into this week's list and see what we can learn. So first up, we have DMZ number 1. This is on the list for the second week in a row. Last week it was, when we talked about it 6 months ago, it was going for $25 to $35. By this point, it was up to a $40 book. 9.8s were going for $280. And this was all because HBO show and potentially Rosario Dawson attached to it. Now it is a $20 to $50 book for a raw copy. 9.8s are down a little bit, $2 to $250. I would still call this steady because most of the sales are those raw copies, and it is really in that $20 to $50 range with a lot of sales, 30 to 40, which is kind of where it was at then. But definitely an I'll be back because you've been able to get some deals on it if you were patient. 9.8s have dropped back a little bit. I believe the show is still in development. So we'll see when, though. That's the big thing, is it takes a long time for these things to actually get made. So we'll see when it does, when it actually comes out. Next we're going to move, that was our only option TV kind of book this week. That wasn't Marvel and DC, I should say. And we're going to move into covers. And first up for our covers is Go-Go Power Rangers number 8. The Nacha Bustos, 1 in 25. First appearance of the Ranger Slayer, excuse me. Back then, raw copies of this were going for $50. Now, there's only been 2 sales, but there's also almost no listings of this one, so it's kind of a weird thing. The 2 sales, though, are way down. $13 for a raw copy. A 9.8 did go for $125. So I don't know what to think about this. There's only the 2 sales. They were for much cheaper than what it was going for back then. Is it just that Power Rangers fans grab these and aren't putting them on the market? And therefore there's not really books out there to kind of keep the price up. Overall, though, this looks like a trap. You know, the one sale was only for $13. It's definitely down. We'll see. It's hard to judge these books when there's this little actual sales and movement going on. So next we have Marvel Action Chillers number 2. This is the Sweeney Boo 1 in 10 Elsa Bloodstone variant, and this thing was going for $30 to $40. So triple to quadruple ratio on a 1 in 10, which is really good for 1 in 10, but now it's only a $10 to $25 book. 9.8 went for $55, so hasn't been able to maintain a lot. Not sure what the drive was for this particular variant that made it jump to start with, other than it was sort of rare. I said it was probably going to be a trap. I don't think it's quite a trap. It's more of an I'll be back, but definitely down, and definitely wasn't able to sustain those initial prices. Next, we have Champions number 1, the second print, with this nice Kamala Khan cover and everything. Kamala Khan was kind of hot in the fall because we got casting news. We knew the show was coming. So back then, the second print was going for $25-$30. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. 9.8's going for $50 to $100. So another kind of I'll be back, which is kind of what I predicted with this one. It's down a little bit, but it's still going for decent value, well above cover price for the second print. Next, our last cover of the week is Dr. Aphra number 6, the Jim Bartell 1 in 25. This was the one I really wanted, never did grab, just thought it was a gorgeous Jim Bartell cover of a really cool character, raw copies, And that really had the trifecta going. It's hot cover, hot artist, character that people are specking on for future Star Wars. So it kind of had the trifecta going. So back then it jumped this 125 jumped all the way up to $130 to $180 book. Now it's an $80 to $175 book. 9.8, so we're going in the $500 range. So definitely big money for a 9.8. I said I'll be back, and I would say that I was probably pretty right on this. It's been pretty steady in that low to mid 100 ranges, with occasionally a little lower, occasionally a little more. So definitely, and I'll be back, that if you've been patient and really been watching it, you could have found a deal. A couple of sales under $100, you could have definitely gotten a deal on this. But this one just took some patience, but still going for big money for a 1 in 25. Next, we had our one hot indie of the week. This was A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, #1, The Dweez, 1 in 5. This was on the list last week as well. This was a $20 to $25 book last week when we talked about it. By this point, a week plus after release, it was going for $30 to $35. And this had everything to do with a movie that had already come out that was kind of a cult classic that now they were making it into a comic book. It's why people were chasing this. So I said it was a $30 to $35 book at this point 6 months ago. Now it's a $5 to $30 book. 9.8s are only cost you $50 to $80. So this was definitely an I'll be back. Definitely could have, a little patience here would have paid off. Next, we're going to move into some comic buzz. And first up, we have Marvel Spotlight #9. This is also a second week in a row book. This is the first appearance of Mr. E, and this had everything to do with Kate's retconning this character that had only appeared once in this issue years and years ago to have a connection with Null and be part of this King in Black thing. Last week when we talked about it, it jumped up to like a $10 to $25 book. 9.6s were going for $100. This point, Raw went for $175, and I have to wonder about the sale, but that's what they were reporting, that there were sales of $175 for this, for a Raw copy. I said at the time that that's a dumpster fire. You can see it on the, and it was. If those sales were real, that was a disaster for whoever did that. It's a $10 to $25 book now, probably more so for, is it Captain Universe or whatever than it is for Mr. E. 9.6s are 90 to 150. Yeah, if you paid 175 for this, if those were real sales, that was definitely not a good decision. And yeah, you can guess which is going to be our biggest drop of the week. Like I said, I do wonder about how real those sales were that they were reporting, if that wasn't some market manipulation going on, but maybe not, because we've seen that kind of crazy reaction to some stuff when people were trying to jump on it. So next, we're going to move on to DC Future State. So this is actually, DC Nation Presents DC Future State. This was the preview of all the Future State characters and books that were coming out in January. And this is the local comic shop day 1 per store variant of that preview that was actually a free book. Back then, right at release, raw copies were going for $50. Now raw copies will cost you $50 to $75. 9.8s will cost you $200 to $300. So this one is up. It definitely was worth it. It has this first appearance this preview appearance of Yara Flor. It has this preview appearance of the next Batman, and there were several other characters introduced during that Future State that are in there. So that's what's driving this book, and it's still maintaining a pretty good value. We'll see. The Yara Flor and next Batman have both got their own series coming out that are set more in the current timeline. We'll see which of these characters really take off. But if they do, then I would imagine this book will continue to do well. Next, we have Venom #3. This is the 4th print of the first appearance of Null. And this obviously was just right at the start of the King in Black storyline finally coming out. Raw copies were going for $60 back then. 9.8s were going for $230. Now raw copies will cost you $50 to $70. So right in that same range. 9.8s have dropped back a little bit, $150 to $200. So still going to call this kind of steady in the I'll be back range, because most of the sales are still kind of raw copies. But yeah, we're at the end of the King in Black line. We'll see. I would expect that we won't get Null stories kind of immediately, that we might see a slight step back on some of these Null books. So over the next 6 months might be a good time to be watching and see if you can find a deal on some of this Null stuff now that Donny Cates is moving away from Venom, and we'll probably get a little bit of a lull. We'll see. I don't know who the next writer is going to be for Venom after Cates goes off, and maybe they'll use Null immediately, and we won't get that lull. We'll see. Next, we're going to have our last of our comic buzz, and this is New Avengers number 9. The first appearance of Todd Ziller as the American Kaiju. This is one of those that sometimes I just don't understand why they put these on the list. Basically, this character was supposed to appear as part of this King in Black storyline. So there was a ton of sales, but all the sales were basically for cover price. So yeah, they put it on the list. I said back then, whatever. Okay, if you're paying cover price for a book, okay. Now it's still a $1 to $10 book. A 9.8 would only cost you $25 to $50, so almost cheaper than sending it in yourself. So yeah, it's still just kind of a whatever. I guess if you want it, but nobody really cares. So with that, we're going to move into our one DC TV book this week, and this is JLA number 26. The first appearance of Joaquin Thunder, the new owner of Thunderbolt, which is one of the genie kind of things in the DC universe, and this was going for $10 to $15 because there was rumors this character was going to join the Stargirl show. Now it's a $1 to $10 book. It's basically a cover price book at this point. I said it was kind of a trap. It turned out to be basically a trap, a small one because you weren't paying big money, but yeah, there's just not really any interest in here, which is fairly typical for those WB shows. But next, we have a little MCU spec, and this is The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu number 19. First appearance of White Tiger, which was already a pretty good book. But we got rumors that this character might be a part of the next Black Panther movie. So that caused raw copies to jump to $175 on average. 9.6 was sold for $660. Now raw copies are going $250 to $325, so they have increased. There's not a ton of slab copies of this, so there's not a lot of slab sales to compare, but there was a 9.0 that went for that 600 plus price point, so right in the same range as that 9.6 from 6 months ago. So this one's definitely up, particularly for all those raw copies that have been selling. So this has been straight cash. It's definitely been really cool cover. White Tiger is an interesting character. We'll see if he actually gets used though in the MCU. Next, we have Brute Force, number 1, from 1990. And this is a weird collection of animal-type characters in the Marvel Universe. And this hit the list because there was rumors that maybe they would turn this into a animated project for Disney+. Seems like a stretch with all the animated shows Disney+ could go with, but we'll see. And it caused raw copies to jump up to $20. I thought this was an absolute trap, and it's turned more into an I'll be back. You can get it as low as $5, but it's still going 10 to 20 fairly regularly as well. So, down, but not, it didn't come crashing down, which kind of surprises me given what this book is, but we'll see. With that, we got 4 books left, all Star Wars related. The first 3 are all related to The Mandalorian, season 2 that was coming out while this list was on. When this list came out. First up, we have Star Wars Heir to the Empire, number 1. This is the first appearance of Grand Admiral Thrawn and Mara Jade. This is the list because of Grand Admiral Thrawn, because Ahsoka name dropped him in, I don't remember which episode, but in one of the episodes of The Mandalorian. Raw copies jumped up to $175 on average. Now they're still going $125 to $225, so that averages out to 175. 9.8s are hitting 1,500, which they weren't quite at back then, but they got there. It was pretty quick. They were going for over $1,000, within a week or so of when this list hit. They didn't list the 9.8, but I know for a fact because I was looking at them because I just was trying to acquire a copy of this book. So I predicted this would be straight cash. Really, it's been very steady. We haven't gotten any new news. We know We got all the news back in early December that she mentioned Thrawn, that Ahsoka was getting a show. My guess is this book has been setting pretty steady. My guess is it'll start moving again when we get official casting for Thrawn, or maybe when the Ahsoka show comes out and we actually get some lead up to the Thrawn storyline. So, but for now, it's been very steady over the last 6 months. Trust me, I've been looking at it this is a book I've been following fairly closely. So yeah. Next, we have Star Wars Clone Wars Defenders of the Lost Temple. This is the first appearance of Bo-Katan in comics. Now, this is a smaller book. Like, you'll see it in a slab. And this is a smaller size book. This is not a full-size comic. Raw copies of this are a raw copy, low grade, sold for $250 back then. 9.2 went for $750. This one I would call pretty steady also. Raw copies are going $300 to $600. 9.6 recently sold for $850, which you could say that's maybe down. There's not a lot of these out there. That's fairly hard to find, but overall, it's been pretty steady. So yeah, and we know we're going to get more Bo-Katan most likely in season 3 of The Mandalorian. So next we have Star Wars Tales number 4, the first appearance of the Dark Troopers. Also made an appearance in the Mandalorian show around the same time. Raw copies for these guys were going for $20, and they're still going 10 to 30. Another book that's been very steady. Put this as an I'll be back instead of a worth it like the last two, because you could actually get it for cheaper fairly easily if you were patient. But yeah, it's been in that same range. And then last but not least, our last Star Wars book is Star Wars Legacy number 1. And this was not related to the Mandalorian show, just a Star Wars book with several first appearances, including Darth Krayt, Darth Neil, the first full appearance, I think they claim, of Cade Skywalker. So you can debate whether it's his first full or second or whatever. I don't know the details on that particular appearance. Raw copies back then were $80, 9.8 sold for $550. And another very steady Star Wars book, which is a little surprising. I kind of expected some of these to climb. They really didn't. They all stayed right in the same ranges. $50 to $135 for raw copies on this sucker. $500 to $700 for 9.8. So maybe it's crept a little bit higher, but it's really been in that same range for the most part. So that's this week's list. A lot of Star Wars stuff. I want to give special credit to the slide you're about to see, to Comic Collector Geek, who suggested that I do kind of a recap slide at the end. So if you're enjoying the slide that I've been doing, showing off how many books went up, how many books went down, and what the biggest movers were, give him a shout out. Check him out on YouTube and Instagram. So thank you, Comic Collector Geek. And here's your little recap slide. We'll see you next time.